Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind. Well, we're kind of living through the age of leftist policies. You know, the typical la-di-da, kumbaya, naive bullshit. And with these policies comes a new era. The era of the criminal. We're living through these times where criminals can run rampant. Young criminals can do what they want and pretty much get away with it. Nobody's gonna stop them. Because as we keep hearing from Democrat politicians in major Democrat cities, actually these armed criminals going around victimizing innocent civilians aren't really the perpetrators. They're not the bad guys. They're just victims of circumstance. And if we just donated more money to BLM, they would stop. The crime would all cease instantaneously, and we'd all be living in a white fence, green grass, suburban utopia, right? I mean, that's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told us. Every time we mention these mobs of young thugs, especially the flash mobs, politicians tell us, don't jump to conclusions, don't demonize these kids. They're not criminals, they're just groups of youths. I think that's what Brandon Johnson called them. Maybe I could find that clip and play it here.
Look, demonizing children is wrong. We have to keep them safe as well.
You know, we're living through the era of stupid, where Democrat politicians and their faux compassion shtick love to play the moral superiority angle on the issue of crime. They love to pretend as if they have all of these genius solutions, but they have no solutions, and all they're doing is enabling what we're seeing more and more of. Out of control, young, violent predators. We got some massively viral crimes to cover today from various different Democrat strongholds. Let me show you guys some of these events, and then let's have a conversation about, well, what we usually discuss, Democrat stupidity. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks. So Brandon Johnson told you not to demonize these kids. They're not criminals. They're just lost and confused young children. Yeah, do lost and confused young children do stuff like this in the middle of the night in Chicago? These are the types of kids and these are the types of crimes that go unpunished in Democrat cities. I mean, it is frickin' open season. Are you an innocent tax-paying civilian in the city of Chicago? Well then no worries, folks. You're basically a fish for criminals to catch, with very little impeding them. And it's always teenagers. Teenagers are running rampant. There's no control. There's not enough policing in these neighborhoods because they've pulled back. They've defunded the police. These kids are being arrested. They're getting little slaps on the wrist and then sent back right on the streets to continue to commit these heinous acts. And this might sound maybe a little bit extreme, it may sound a little bit hypocritical, but maybe back in the 1990s, Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden's branding of young gang members as super predators.
They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel. And
maybe they were onto something to a certain extent. I mean, we've used that as a political weapon against them. Well, to be fair, mostly to highlight their hypocrisy on the issue of crime, where back in the day they used to actually attempt to do something about it and tackle violent crime the way it should be tackled. So we call them out on their clear hypocrisy, pretending to be social justice, pro-crime activists these days. The word itself was highly controversial at the time and still is today, but it's exactly what we're seeing. Young super predators with no conscience, no care, no second thoughts or second guesses, no consequences, and they are running rampant, victimizing innocent civilians across major cities in America. It's time to get tough and it's time to do something about it. I don't know how. I don't have the answers because, Democrats simply don't listen, and, they won't listen until it's too late and they have to do something about it. But something has to be done and someone has to say something. I've been saying something for, Lord knows how long. In fact, 3 years ago, I was warning about this exact phenomenon, specifically youth crime and youth violence. But Democrats didn't heed the warning. Everything we're seeing now is a predictable result post-pandemic. Everything we're seeing now was brought to you by Democrat policies. I said it forever throughout the entire pandemic that school lockdowns are going to be disastrous in the inner city. In neighborhoods where these young, mainly minority youth, many living in poverty, coming from broken families, no father in the home, sometimes no father and no mother in the home. In certain cases, one or maybe both parents could have substance abuse issues and be on the streets. You have these kids totally unaccounted for. The only solace that they had in life, the only refuge, would have been going to school, and what did Democrats do? Democrats sent them home. Except many of these kids never had a home. And so where did they go? They went directly to the streets. Not only losing precious time during their most important developmental years, developing academically and intellectually, not only that, but being sent on the streets desperate and developing all the wrong skills, developing how to survive through criminal action. And I said it 3 years ago, and I'm going to keep saying that. I'm going to keep standing by that. We are going to see a huge surge in youth violence in places like Washington, D.C., California, Philadelphia, Chicago, the list goes on, St. Louis. Nobody listened. Democrats certainly didn't listen. Democrats paraded and cheered on the crime. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, well, they're simply just hungry people. Steal the bread. It's okay. That's what they told you, right?
And so they go out and they need to feed their child and they don't have money. So you maybe they're put in a position where they feel like they either need to shoplift some bread or go hungry that night.
But obviously that was never the case. Obviously there's a certain element of gang culture and street culture, and what Democrats did for 2 years straight with the most susceptible, most vulnerable of youth was put those kids on the street, put them smack in the center of gang culture and gang violence, out of the schools, and they created an absolute epidemic. What we are seeing right now is an epidemic. Those kids who robbed that young woman in Chicago in that late night video, they were kids, probably 15, 16 max, maybe even younger. And on top of that, this just happened. A 14-year-old Chicago teenager just lost his life in a back alley after he attempted a car theft and was, well, let's just say he met his fate.
I didn't know that they was two young boys at the age, they the same age like my grandson.
A tragic story on the South Side with 2 young lives taken by gun violence.
Police tonight are still working to figure out what led to the 2 14-year-olds being shot dead in an alley this weekend.
There's also this happening in Washington, D.C.
We're getting a new look at the suspects in a series of armed robberies around the district. Take a look. This happened last week along 4th Street Southeast. The suspects threatening the victim with a knife and demanding their AirPod, their phone, their shoes, and school supplies. Look how young they are. The victim refused and began to yell. One suspect pulled out a gun. They made off with the items and ran away. That's just the latest in teen violence causing chaos across D.C., a city under siege tonight.
2 teens now in custody after 10 separate carjackings across the district, 7 of them at gunpoint. It's just the latest in a string of carjackings plaguing D.C.
It's a hot mess.
Over the weekend, a young boy shot and killed in a botched carjacking on Saturday night along D Street Northwest. We've since learned the 13-year-old had several prior carjacking offenses. And a 15-year-old girl arrested last week for a carjacking and fatal crash on Brentwood Road was allowed to go home with an ankle monitor despite her priors for robbery and theft, according to the Washington Post.
And that comes after, I think, a 13 or 14-year-old boy met the exact same fate in Washington, D.C., attempting to carjack a security guard who was currently on duty. You know, we're talking about 12-year-old kids, 13-year-old kids, 14-year-old kids. We're talking about an epidemic in violence, specifically car thefts and armed robberies. It's getting bloody, obviously, and the blood is on the hands of the Democrat Party. Full frickin' stop. They have been so incredibly dumb, incompetent, naive. Their policies have been so idiotic. I mean, to such a heightened degree, to such a heightened level. They have created the perfect storm for this criminal element to expand. And it's not like it's this unintended consequence. It's not like they had good intentions and just, oopsies, they screwed up. Whoopsies, nobody ever warned us. Unintended consequences. These consequences were fully intended. They were predictable. They were expected. And it seems as though it's almost as if what Democrats wanted. They want more of this. Why? Because if you think about it, the more young kids are uneducated in inner city communities, the more they thrive, the more broken homes there's going to be, the more they can pander pander for minority votes in inner city communities. They don't want things to get better. But it's probably true, so I'm just gonna freaking say it. The Democrats have created this situation where we're seeing 13 and 14-year-old kids involved in armed robberies. Well, what does that do? That leads to more Trayvon Martin situations. And I'm just gonna freaking say it, Democrats love Trayvon Martin situations. It's a moment to activate the activist base. It's a moment to bring back Black Lives Matter or other tangent groups. Or rather, I guess we could say parallel groups is probably a better way to say it. It's the perfect environment for them. They create this chaos, they create these issues, and then they run on them. Folks, the violence you're seeing in your cities, it was brought to you by the Democrat Party. The youth violence was brought to you by the Democrat Party. The drugs, the despair, the depression, the alcoholism, the breaking up of families, the losing everything throughout the pandemic, it was brought to you by Democrat cities. The inflation was brought to you by the Democrat Party. All of that is true. You could try to debunk it all you want. It's freaking true. It's factual. And now what's going to happen? Well, moving forward, Democrats are going to be running on all of these social issues. Don't vote for the people who caused the problem in the first place, please. It's time for a serious moment of reckoning. It's time for a serious wake-up call. It's time to do something about this crime. It's time to get tough on crime in general, because if not, this Democrat city reality is going to be America's reality. You know, these things tend to snowball, and we're at the early stages post-pandemic. If we don't do something now and do something fast, everywhere is going to be like Southside Chicago. Anyways, that's what I got for you guys on this one. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, friends, and I'll see you on the next one.